Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would like to talk about the criminal justice system in Kenya, and I particularly want to concentrate on the role of prosecution in order to seek justice. Prosecution is on the government side, whereby every time one commits a criminal offense, the culprit is actually a product of the government. So it is the government that accuses its own on the wrongs that he or she has committed. To acquit or to convict a suspect in the criminal cases, you must be in a position to do the right kind of investigation, to come up with sufficient evidence and prove the case beyond reasonable doubt, whereby if sufficient evidence shows that the suspect committed the crime, then he or she is convicted. And if the prosecution cannot be able to provide sufficient evidence, then this person is acquitted or released and his case is dismissed. When I look at our criminal justice system in Kenya, especially on the side of investigation, that is where we have the greatest weakness. Though with the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, we were able to bring about changes in the Attorney General's office and also in the office of the public prosecution, whereby the Director of Public Prosecution became autonomous. We also have the investigating body under the DCI, which was also made semi-autonomous, so that each of these bodies can be able to carry out its mandate with some amount of independence. Whereas we can see there are some improvement, there is still a lot of challenges as far as that field is concerned. And this one particularly goes to the investigation aspect. The investigation forms the basis of compiling sufficient evidence of a particular criminal case. Unlike the civil case, criminal case is a bit more complicated because it requires sufficient evidence to an extent where you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this person is culpable for the offense that he is deemed to have committed. But if there is even an iota of doubt, whereby it casts some form of doubt that there might be a possibility that this person may not have committed this crime, then it means the prosecution body has to go back to the drawing board to gather more evidence to come up with a watertight case whereby they are able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this suspect is culpable. And this is where our weakness is. The government has been losing a lot of cases of criminal nature because of poor investigative styles. I am not saying that the DCI or the DPP and the entire body involved in criminal justice system is incompetent, no. But remember, these are bodies that should complement one another. If there is a situation where there is a weakness on one of those areas, then chances are the whole system will not be able to function effectively. I am particularly pleased with the few changes that the DPP Nugdin Haji has brought in the Directorate of Prosecution, whereby he has brought in prosecutors who are not necessarily policemen, but they have a background of law and they have undergone some form of training to be able to handle some of these complex issues. But we need to understand that justice system is not static, it's dynamic. There are changes coming up. A human being keeps on changing in terms of complexity of his or her behavior. So we have to be up to date with the changes of the complexity of the behavior so that we are able to handle any new cases that come up. I have particularly disappointed with one of the cases whereby a woman in one of the counties had a domestic uh, quarrel with her husband. They fought. He hit the husband on the head and also on the chest and went ahead and disfigured his manhood. So looking at the whole case, it clearly shows that this particular culprit had premeditated her actions and the murder was committed. But now the charge came to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this is the culprit who actually carried out this crime. Yes, it's a husband and a wife sharing a one bedroom. So to the common person, definitely this becomes the main suspect. But as simple or as obvious as it may appear, when it comes to evidence, you must prove even the finest details with the proof that actually this is the person who carried out this offense. Because there are other possibilities, like an outsider can come and commit the same offense and disappear from the scene. So the fact that it happened within the presence of their residence does not completely tie the suspect to the commission of the crime. And when this case was brought before the magistrate, the prosecution could not prove beyond reasonable doubt that the suspect is the one that committed this crime. And as a result, the evidence presented by the prosecution was weak. It didn't attain a certain threshold to be able to be deemed as a crime committed by her. It may be true she is the one who committed, but the burden of proof was left to the prosecution, and the prosecution could not prove beyond reasonable doubt because there was very little evidence to prove the same. And as a result, when the case came before the magistrate, due to lack of sufficient evidence, the case was dismissed and the suspect was set free. You can see it is a very big danger because there are some things we take for granted. But when it comes to prosecution, the prosecution should go a step further to be able to gather as much evidence as possible. In fact, excessive evidence to a level where the judge or the magistrate will not need to look for further information because the information or evidence provided by the prosecution will be sufficient enough to convict this person. So you see, at the end of the day, the victim died and justice has not been done, or it has not been seen to be done due to the weakness of our prosecution. So there is need for further reform in the prosecution and the investigative bodies. Now, when it comes to investigations, we are using the same old style in complex cases, which requires more knowledge, it requires more understanding, it requires further techniques to establish as much evidence as possible. So there is need for the criminal justice system to have some reforms, particularly in the investigative body, so that when the prosecution brings forth that case, they will have sufficient evidence, and at the same time, the judgment will be fair and it will be seen to be done.